This is Extemporaneously, presented by Jacobin Brothers. And now, Mark Jacobin. Trump 2.0 drops on January 20th, 2025, and previews of the new features are being released. Trump has been announcing cabinet nominations in an apparent attempt to keep national media pundits exasperated and clutching at their pearls. Welcome to Trump 2.0, Take 2. In the episode Trump 2.0, James and I provided our comments on some of Donald's cabinet picks. We determined that all but one of them were at least minimally qualified for the position based on the nature of the assignment, the background of the nominee, and heavily weighting the advantage of the spoils system. Although there are no formal requirements for each cabinet post, each nominee must submit to questioning by the Senate committee that oversees their department and be approved by a simple majority vote of the full Senate. In this episode, we will review again some of Donald's cabinet picks, but with a twist. This time I will be joined by my brother TJ, while James is taking time off to look for Bobby Jr.'s brainworms. Before we start talking about cabinet picks, what is one thing you hope Trump accomplishes in the next 2 years, and one thing you hope he avoids or fails to achieve?
One thing I hope he does accomplish is getting the economy on a better track. Period. Quick and simple. Hope he avoids nuclear war. I'm a simple guy.
Awesome.
My bar's very low.
You think we would have cleared that bar a number of years ago, but recent events have demonstrated otherwise.
For all the people that hate Donald Trump and are worried about what he's going to do as president or Kamala or the Easter Bunny, at the end of the day, they're limited in what they can really do because they're not the king or the dictator of North Korea. But pressing a button is the one legitimate biggest fear I would have of someone who's somewhat egotistical.
Correct. Not to overlook the fact that we are now at war. NATO is now at war with Russia.
Yeah, that's inconvenient.
Our first pick that we'll review today is the Secretary of State. Trump has nominated Marco Rubio. Marco has served as a U.S. Senator for Florida since 2011. He ran for president in 2016, dropping out of the race after failing to win his home state.
I love the guy. Full disclosure and transparency, I'm probably biased because I lived in Florida for 25 years. But across the entire Republican political scenario, I don't think there's a better choice than Marco for a lot of cabinet positions. I don't know if I would have picked this one for him, but it is also reassuring that he's fourth in line in succession should the worst ever happen, and very close to the pulse of the world. I don't know of a better choice Trump could have necessarily made. Rubio's got a really strong long-term set of credentials from Washington, but also, he's the son of immigrants. I think he sees the world differently. I think the fact that he's bilingual will be fantastic for relationships with Europe and European countries.
Especially, I suppose, Spain.
That would be one assumption, yeah. But to be able to go to a meeting in Europe with people who maybe struggle with English and flip to another continental language, I think will help endear him in relationships and possibly help in difficult conversations.
Absolutely, especially with our closer neighbors, which those conversations have already gotten difficult.
Well, look, there's a lot of saber rattling going on between the U.S. and Mexico, and I think he'll help understand the dynamic there. You've got a new president who's also got a lot of bias against her from her nation because of the misogynistic mentality. I mean, the director of the military actually had to say, hey, this is the president. We have to respect the title, even if we're not in love with the person that's in that role. And there's no way that she's going to sit there and let Donald Trump intimidate her. Much respect for her, but I don't think that's the way to handle it. And I think Rubio, once Donald Trump's got a lot bigger things going on, will be able to effectively navigate those waters.
I agree. I think he is an excellent person for our primary diplomat, and we wouldn't feel bad about sending him out into the world to conduct our nation's business, unlike many of the other secretaries of state that have been selected.
You and James are the politicos of the family. I'm just a guy on the street who understands history a little better than some people. But if you held a gun to my head, I don't know who's the Secretary of State right now.
Antony Blinken.
That's right.
Antony Blinken. So moving on to our second pick, Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth. Pete has been a commentator for Fox News since 2014, has an author credit for 4 books, served in the Minneapolis Army National Guard, where he attained the rank of major, and was deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan.
Probably one of the weaker choices for SecDef in the last century and a half. I don't know. I think there had to be 100 better choices, from former generals to other people with more time within and around the Defense Department. I'm always a fan of an outsider coming in with fresh perspective. He is a veteran. He is well educated. Princeton, Harvard, gives him an advantage in communication in a lot of circles that some of the other key personnel won't have. I thought this was returning favors.
Certainly what it sounds like. You've got somebody who spent the last 10 years as a talking head on Fox News. That's generally not your go-to when you think of Secretary of Defense.
I saw a clip with Whoopi Goldberg just shredding him. In many facets, I don't disagree. I mean, the one thing about someone in that role as a commentator does have their finger on the pulse of many things going on in a level of detail that many people won't. But okay, what is he, a major, reserve major?
Army National Guard major with some active duty.
Kudos for serving on the front lines. Appreciate your service. Much respect. Marine Corps Sergeant, I'll salute you and follow your orders. But when you look at the talent of all the generals, and okay, let's go down to a colonel, but someone maybe who's graduated from some of the more advanced military schools, just to understand the corporate structure of the Department of Defense.
See, that's where I disagree with most people, because I see the Secretary of Defense as a civilian post. I actually shy away from career military men or women in that post, because you don't want someone with a career of military indoctrination running the department. I think you want someone who's more along the lines of a chief executive who understands how to run the DoD as a business. After all, you're talking about 1.3 million people on the payroll, the third largest budget in the government at $2 trillion. The largest R&D budget in the world, with the possible exception of China. The DoD has lost $2 trillion over the last 20 years. Putting a military person in charge of the bullet counting is generally the wrong answer, because those guys aren't concerned with counting the bullets, they're concerned with using them. And I think there has to be a balance between military strategy and tactics, which is well handled at the individual combat and at the CENTCOM level, as opposed to the top guy who needs to make sure that all of our people are paid and fed and running like a well-organized machine.
Well, you haven't thought about that much, have you? I don't disagree with you. And on many levels, I do agree to have somebody who's not part of the military political machine. Let's put it on that level. Let's talk about a civilian filling that position. I don't think he fits either bill. I don't think he fits the bill if you want a high-powered general in a time of global uncertainty to understand what needs to go where, which would put him at odds with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs in some cases, probably, and would undermine a chairman of the Joint Chiefs if you had a former general in there like we've had in the past. But let's roll it over. Let's say, okay, let's take someone who's used to running a company. Let's take someone who's had tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people that they were responsible for their daily lives, from their paychecks to their distribution, from making sure that a high level of integrity within the leadership ranks. I don't see where he's in. What did he lead at Fox? His laptop.
I agree entirely. He doesn't fit the bill for either set of qualifications, either civilian or military. One of the interesting discussions I think there is to have is, if you get rid of Pete, who do you plug in? Right now they're talking about Ron DeSantis.
I've had conversations with friends about the Florida political mafia, and this would continue. I don't hate the idea of Ron DeSantis as someone in that role. When you talk about someone who's been responsible for millions of people, someone who's helped guide Florida through this year alone a couple of massive hurricanes and the recovery and just providing security and a feeling of confidence in the government. Don't hate that him as a choice. If you're going to not put someone from the military role, I think someone from the business sector not related to the military industrial complex. So let's not put Hughes Aerospace in there or Lockheed or someone like that. Carly Fiorina. Okay.
I'll tell you another person that I think would warrant strong consideration would be Nikki Haley.
Wouldn't hate that one iota.
Let's move on to Health and Human Services. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is an environmental lawyer and activist. He has won judgments worth hundreds of millions of dollars against public and private interests. He is a critic of the pharmaceutical industry and advocate for improved vaccine safety standards. Bobby Jr. is an outsider in every sense of the word. What do you think?
He's an outsider in his own family, I think, in many ways. He's kind of the political version of Rob Lowe, wouldn't you say? When you look at his youth, when you look at serving time in prison for doing drugs, when you look at how he ended up on the National Resource Defense Council, because that was his plea bargain in South Dakota for his conviction, you're like, what the heck? On the other hand, the guy made it through. Did he make it through because he had some political clout behind his name, some legal clout behind his name? Probably. But who in the higher levels of this country hasn't used their political clout for gain? Donald Trump. Take away his ill-advised, not fully educated battle against vaccine technology. I would have rather seen him Department of the Interior, personally. I want someone who's looking out for people. I didn't see the cases that he won, the big cases that he's won in the environmental scene. But even if he's not super capable as a litigator, he was super capable of being part of a really effective team and is passionate about that. I think he will not put up with the BS, would not put up with political pharmaceutical cronyism that seems to have become rampant within the government channels.
The FDA has a pay-for-play system when it comes to approval for drugs. Drug companies pay for their own approvals. So it is hard for the average person to look at that and not see impropriety. That's just one of the things that Bobby could look at and perhaps restructure in a way that is actually more equitable for the American people and also projects a perception of being equitable and fair for the American people. Because right now, there is a large percentage of the population that doesn't believe there is a separation of church and state when it comes to the FDA and pharmaceutical companies.
I think the level of apparent impropriety in the between the drugs and the food approvals in this country is one of the biggest of any political governmental channel. Let's also extend his ability to look at what's going on with the transformation of our food quiet, with genetic modification that never has to be tested. I mean, I was a vegetarian for a long time, so I'm actually familiar with a lot of this stuff. But lacks or no oversight when it comes to organics and things like that. You look at the medical issues people are having today with gluten issues. Why? We got, 2-3 strains of wheat left from the 50 or plus we had 80, 100 years ago or 70 years ago when we were growing up. Hormones and antibiotics in food, there's a reason that stuff ended up there, no question. Additives in food it helps save billions of dollars. It helps feed millions of extra people. Are we looking closely at them and the long-term impacts? And we should be able to gauge some long-term impacts because some of the stuff we've been adding for 60, 70 years.
Bobby Jr., as we like to call him, thumbs up or thumbs down for HHS?
I'll say thumbs up.
Moving on to education. Linda McMahon. Linda is the co-founder.
Go ahead, sorry.
Linda is the co-founder of what we now know as the World Wrestling Entertainment. She and her husband Vince transformed entertainment wrestling into the cultural powerhouse it is today. Linda served 1 year on the Connecticut Board of Education in 2009 and has a degree in French. I would think that this is one of the weaker appointments.
This is one of the weaker appointments in the history of the U.S. government, I think. One thing that you may have intentionally or accidentally missed on that mini bio is $9 million in campaign donations to Donald J. Trump over 2 elections.
We've already stipulated that nominees are beneficiaries of the spoils system.
That's a big spoil. That's not stumping for somebody or helping out in a campaign. That's millions and millions of dollars of donations. I am not an academic elitist or snob. Got a degree, a bachelor's degree from East Carolina, a good football school, and a solid school. I'm sure it's got accreditation. But I come from a world, a lot on the tech side, where experience speaks for a lot, regardless of your educational background. What at all says that she's got the credential to be the superintendent of schools for a county in the United States or a state, much less the nation? Were there 1,000 picks better? Would I not want, just like the military, would I not necessarily want someone from the academic infrastructure? Maybe not. Now you're dealing with billions of dollars, millions of people, and most critically, the future of this nation and the future of the world as far as their education goes. Will she have good ideas? Probably. Has she got some solid business experience? Absolutely. I have actually more respect for people that have failed in business than people who just started out with a bunch of money and made more.
Linda is coming into a situation where test scores across the country have fallen over the last 50 years. The folks who we thought were good picks for the Department of Education haven't been successful. I do think that she's the wrong person from a traditional perspective. I think we're at the point with education that we may as well try something different because what's traditional certainly hasn't been working.
I think maybe you look at somebody with a lot stronger corporate background, or hell, even a military background here actually might be a good play. But realistically, unless the whole Republican Party in Washington, D.C. is just literally hanging on Trump's coattails, I don't see of all the people we're talking about, I don't see that she would necessarily get confirmed, and then we have to start over, and that's a really important role.
That's a question mark. She hasn't been one of the nominees making the headlines, so thumbs up or thumbs down for Linda McMahon.
From me, it's a thumbs down. I like her as a person and a business person. SBA, yes. Education, not so much.
Moving on to Attorney General Pam Bondi. Pam served 8 years as the Attorney General of where? Florida, concluding in 2019. She was hired to defend Trump during his first impeachment and has been the subject of allegations of impropriety in Trump's orbit since 2016. We have another presumed member of the Florida Mafia headed to the White House.
Not fully unbiased, being a former Florida resident, 2 thumbs up. Absolutely 2 thumbs up. I don't think it's going to achieve, and I was talking to this about someone else, Trump in his negotiation floated a lead balloon with Getz originally and set the bar way out in, I don't know, I would say beyond left field, beyond the left field stands and out in the frickin' bay so that he could put her forward. Did he think it through that way? I don't know. I don't care. I think she's awesome. But my fear for her, and she knows this going in, she is a no-bull person. And if we go back further into her resume, she was the one that confirmed the 2000 election finally, when there was the big recounts in Florida with the hanging chads with George Bush becoming the president. So she's not afraid to stand up to her boss. She's not afraid to make a hard decision. She and I forget the other person who helped defend Trump in his impeachment. I don't believe Trump should have been impeached for what he got impeached for. I still think he should have been impeached for not trying to stop it with more enthusiasm, the January 6th things, but very strong character. She's got a legitimate educational background, the University of Florida. Stetson University is a very solid law school, but it's not what you'd call, a national standard for becoming a politician. And I'm okay with that. The challenge for her is that Donald Trump's going to ask her to do something that she knows is wrong. And I believe with her character and integrity, she's going to tell him where to go politely, that it's not possible, and she's going to get fired. That's really what's going to happen here.
And the difference with Trump 2.0 is that everybody knows that. You're either going to toe the line or you're going to get in line, the unemployment line. We'll see what these different strategies these nominees take into their jobs, knowing that there is either you're with me or against me mentality. Moving on to Chief of Staff Susan Wiles. Susan is a career political advisor and lobbyist. Her political involvement dates to Ronald Reagan's 1980 presidential campaign. She was the co-chair of Trump's 2024 presidential campaign and is the first woman to be appointed chief of staff.
Thumbs up. I don't care. The chief of staff is the one who's supposed to be the yes and also be able to, that's the gatekeeper. Looking at her background, I don't see a reason why someone could say, no, that's not a good choice. I think she's been around the political scenario enough to protect the president, to serve the president. And honestly, if it wasn't for watching movies, I probably wouldn't have as much of a clue what the chief of staff really does. But that is a big role I think she's probably well suited for.
9 times out of 10, the chief of staff is inconsequential from the public's perspective. They're internal to the White House. They keep the president's internal advisors running on all cylinders. But when it comes to Donald Trump, chief of staff has been a problematic position, which is no different from any of the other positions.
I was like, right.
But Susan Wiles does appear to exert a level of influence over Donald Trump that no one has been able to do for his political career. She keeps him calm. She keeps him focused. She seems to bring out the best version of Donald Trump that we're going to get. I made a prediction in our previous show, and I'll repeat it here. I think that the actual success, the perceived success of the Trump administration is tied to the tenure of Susan Wiles as chief of staff.
That could either be a long-serving loyal role or she'll be updating her resume pretty quickly. But I agree with what you're saying about it's how she seems to have been able to embed some stability in the Donald Trump world as much as would be possible to your point. You opened this conversation talking about, okay, what's one thing I like about Donald Trump? What's the thing I'm afraid of? One thing I'm 50-50 on is for sure Donald Trump's first presidential term was absolutely about the one and only Donald J. Trump. This one, I have a hope that not just because he lost, which had to have served him a little bit of humility, whether he wanted it or not, it had to have humbled him, but also that the legacy of what he can do for America to actually make America great will be with a different tone. And I think if anyone, she can help that. And I'm hopeful. We haven't seen his social media posts like we did for the previous whole decade.
He single-handedly kept Twitter relevant.
Yeah, and our next topic of conversation single-handedly probably crashed it. But as far as chief of staff, I'm all in. I think she's awesome. Oh, by the way, her dad was Pat Summerall, NFL football player and commentator forever on football. So she's got to be awesome.
Ah, right. Yeah.
Keep it simple, baby.
Yeah. If we can bring elements of the NFL and World Wrestling Entertainment into the White House, I think society will be just fine because those are two powerhouse industries.
And the subtlety of her, part of the Florida mafia, Florida political mafia also.
We've been talking extemporaneously. This has been Extemporaneously, presented by Jacobin Brothers. For more episodes and content, visit jacobinbrothers.com.